Tēnā no tātou katoa, I tae mai whakarongo ngā kōrero I te pōnei mō te tari Kaeo Office. Nō reira, kia ora tātou. Kia ora everybody. This particular sequence or conversation, there has been many discussions that I've had and questions, I guess, on how do we apply he whakaputanga and te tiriti o Waitangi. This question has been asked right across. I just would like to say at this particular point in time, the other conversations or topics that we've shared, again, regarding the analytical or humility, dignity, respect, are a component of the use of he whakaputanga and te tiriti. But in saying that, I just thought I'd take this opportunity to look at a way of analysing the situation we're in right now so that it can be applied. In the question, how do I apply he whakaputanga and te tiriti to my life, which is basically the general question that has been asked. It is, and it has been difficult if the document hasn't been read, because there are many, and your research hasn't taken you into the correct dialect that's required. But in saying that, I'm encouraging that to happen with your research and those ways of looking for that true dialect on the authors and how they saw the world at the time they wrote the document. So one of the expressions that has been used is like a rugby game. You make your way to the changing room and you put on the club socks and jersey and you run out onto the field and start learning how to use he whakaputanga, me te tiriti o Waitangi. But what this particular conversation here is about, it's about, again, I'm going to suggest we've got to do an analogy or an investigation or research into the current situation we're in. And there are many countries around the world that use this analogy. And I want to say it's no different from our taha Māori world on doing your gathering intel on the state of our Māori nation. So in saying that, the elders took the opportunity to get some data from the government, from the past national and this Labour government here, regarding tangata whenua specifically. And that data was regarding statistics, and we have spoken about statistics in an attempt to get data is very important. Our elders didn't make decisions without data or information, the correct information too, by the way. False information didn't make its way into the decision-making process. But the conclusion of a point in time where the taumata kaumātua ngāpui nui tonu with elders right throughout the mutu decided that it was appropriate that they leave behind a particular type of philosophy that our taha Māori world used from an ancient time, even in the journey to Hawaii Nui, Hawaii Ro, Hawaii Pāmāmau, to getting here, gathering the intel from the maramataka, using the trade winds or the winds that were used, looking at the birds and all those kinds of things. I want to assure that it wasn't guesswork and the different maps. So what I've found in the documents and videos and the conversations that were recorded was the use of the pepeha again, and the use of these 5 areas that are relevant to analysing and which area specific issues fit. The data that was gathered, if I can say that was gathered, was in regards to suicide, mental health, drug and alcohol addiction, incarceration, education, and there are many more where our Māori culture specifically, and I don't want to eliminate any of the other cultures here in Aotearoa and where they're in, but it just became, once that data was acquired, it became very clear that tangata whenua Māori were the most significant sufferers of those attributes of I'm going to defend colonization. So the colonization is responsible globally when they were taken to indigenous cultures, responsible for giving alcohol and drugs to tangata whenua so that they could engage in things of suicide and make sure they didn't get employment, and make sure they did get incarcerated quite easily, and all those kinds of things. And I don't mind having discussions or robust arguments about the evidence that we have to justify that. But it's well known, family and sexual violence, all components of colonization. But we do need to find our way through this through our analytical thinking, if I can say it like that. And sovereignty is something I want to touch on, but talk more about in the future. Sovereignty does not belong to us here as tangata whenua. Sovereignty belongs to another culture. Sovereignty and the kupu tino rangatiratanga is not a parallel of one another. That clear understanding of the difference between sovereignty and tino rangatiratanga is in the document, as I've advocated on another conversation. Article 1 of He Oko Putanga, ko mātou ko ngā tino rangatira o Nutirini I raro mai hauraki. That doesn't mean the sovereign people of Nutirini. If you go to Article 2, ko te kinitana, ko te mana I te whenua, the sovereignty of the land, that's where we find the word sovereignty, and the explanation of sovereignty in a kupu is ko te kinitana. It's not tino rangatiratanga. Tino rangatiratanga is something totally different, if I could suggest that. But in our pepeha, as we've discussed earlier, we have components of our pepeha, and I'll just mention a few from my pepeha, emi te maunga whangaroa te awa mātātua te waka. So if we look at those two components, the maunga and the harbour, or the moana, whaingaro. So if you do find yourself wanting to investigate the state of your hapu, the state of your tribal area, or the state of your of Aotearoa, because you can apply this process to that very, very easily. And so within our culture, we have a social structure, we have a cultural structure, we have political structure, we have an economic structure, and we have an environmental structure. So these five areas are a conclusion of everything that we are as a culture, using English words. Now, for an example, if we go through our pepeha, our maunga, and our harbour, just to start with, okay, we can go to our waka. So what are the social issues for our maunga? What are the social issues? What are the cultural issues for our maunga? What are the political issues? What are the economic issues? What are the environmental issues that we have on our maunga? It is a challenge to understand what actually is social, cultural, political, environmental, and economic. I do know that, and those of us who are aware of settlements that have happened with the government under the English text, that there are in fact 5 settlements. Up in the north here, they're talking about an economic settlement and a social settlement. They were talking about a social settlement, but they've taken that away and they've talked about a cultural settlement, where economically they're offering 1% of the land value, and culturally they want to buy a mountain that's significant to an entire territory and take it from one hapu and give it to all the hapu and leave them to squabble about it after they walk out the door. But they will come back and they will deal with a social settlement. For an example, again, up in the north here, the national government, or Mr. Chris Finlayson, offered a certain number of houses, but in the statistics of homelessness that they provided us with, it was merely a small percentage, and I'm going to make this claim, it was only 1% of our homeless state that we had. So they were going to settle a social issue by offering 1% of the homeless people in our northern tribes a home with a mortgage, with rates, and with all of those penalties that come with a social settlement, and come with a social settlement, and come with an economic settlement, and come with a political and environmental settlement. But back to the matter at hand, in doing your analogy, for an example, on your maunga, you could ask these questions as a social issue. What part do we play socially when it comes to our maunga? Are there events that we celebrate with our maunga? What are the real estate agents that exist on your maunga that are buying and selling properties? And what are the surveyors doing? Are they chopping sections into smaller? Are there lifestyle blocks? Are there those kinds of things? So what is the political issue on our maunga? Do we actually have a say, or are we part of a resource consent where we file a submission for development, and we become taken into account with the RMA? What are the economic issues with our maunga? Is the hapu deriving any economy, for an example, from any activities on our maunga? And look, dare I say, last but not least, we have an environmental matter or a state on our maunga. So I don't want to go into the environmental issues because we all know what they are. None of us have a clean river, just to start with, and the land is probably contaminated with hazardous substances and new organisms. But at the end of the day, these things need to be identified. With a maunga within a pepeha, you can identify at least 100 social issues, 100 cultural issues, 100 political issues, 100 economic issues, and 100 environmental issues that you have regarding your maunga. So when you come to your harbour or your moana, what are the social issues? What social activities do we play on our moana now? Is there any such thing as social activities for our people within our harbour? And I'm not talking about recreational fishing. Recreational fishing is an industry. It has nothing to do with social, because we're individuals. And that's what that system has done. What are the cultural issues in your moana? Are the names still there that your tupuna gave, for an example, or is it called, like where I am right now up in the north, is it called Doubtless Bay because of a comment that was made of a boat passing the harbour where the leading hand on the deck of the boat yelled up to the man in the crow's nest, "That be a bay over there," and the response was, "Doubtless it is," and that's how Doubtless Bay got its name, when in fact the real name. So there's a cultural issues. There's lots of cultural issues, and so you go to the political issues again. What politically say do you have within your rohe moana? And I'm sure you're getting the idea what economic issues are. And, you know, when you're looking at all the attributes of your pepeha and you come to an economic issue, you're not only talking about the profits that you've lost, but where I come from, a place called Rātaro Komutu, a main road was put right through a food basket, or where we gathered kaimoana. And as we're going into those what's now grassland and farmland and digging down, you know, only a few feet, we're finding the remnants of kaimoana pipi beds, and that are now being blocked from high-low tide in feeding. So it's not only the gain that you've lost, it's what you have lost as well from, economically, it's costing you your health, not having access to kaimoana, the right kaimoana at the right time. So another cultural issue is your maramataka is being abused by recreational, commercial and customary fishing and black market fishing. So we do have a lot of issues. And when it comes down to environmental issues, we all know what those environmental issues, runoffs from dairy farms and beef farms and industry, if I can say it like that. And I just want to be very, very sincere here. As you go through your pepeha and you go into your tupuna, your waka? What are your social, cultural, political, economic, and environmental issues regarding your waka? What are your social, cultural, political, economic, and environmental issues regarding your wharekai, regarding your wharetupuna, regarding your urupa? You can dig deep. You need to dig deep if you want to be a participant in He Whakaputanga and Te Tiriti, you have to dig deep to see where we are today. I'd like to make this validation, I guess, because of what I'm demanding, if I can say it like that. It's my opinion that it's not the document that has let us down. The document hasn't done anything to let us down. It's us that have let the document down, and we've done that quite consciously. In some cases, we've done it willingly. And I'm sincerely, again, just asking if we could reconsider that position and take responsibility for the great deal and amount of freedom that we actually still do have. As was being mentioned, what freedom do we have, Bryce? You have the freedom to stop your cousins and your brothers and sisters committing suicide. You have the freedom to not allow them to be homeless. You've got the freedom to give them education. You've got the freedom to let them grow a garden. You've got the freedom to do all of those things. So we're not doing a lot with the freedom that we do have. And that's only my opinion because of our hapu and whānau psyche of greed and selfishness and blame and those kinds of things, which are nobody's fault. It's what colonization has done. So if you can challenge yourself, you begin the process of using He Whakaputanga, because once you realize all of the issues that you are facing today as a contemporary time, you come down to this list here: rangatiratanga, wharaungatanga, manakitanga, kotahitanga, and tūkaipo. That's where we were. These are the 5 standards that were drawn from the old ancient reo and brought forward as to what was the structure of our tribal areas, what was the structure. Don't worry about all the comments about we were savages and we were eating one another and we were beating one another up, and those romantic stories are good and fine on the big screen, but when it comes down to reality, what is manakitanga? What is whanaungatanga? That's reality here. This is where we actually were. So we're just as a simple footnote, I'll say it, that's where we are. Do your analogy, gather your data, do your intel, and we'll talk later about the sequences that are taken to get back to here as far as using the document is concerned. So in saying that, again, I hope this has been helpful. I'd like to thank, again, all the people who have made comments and asked questions. It's very much appreciated. Share, if you want to share with people you know, I would really appreciate that. So in saying that, nō reira, kia ora tātou.